So when people like Open Door come in and they're like, I'll give you $75,000 for this home. Well, then in 2 years, because of the data models that you've used, you're going to turn around and flip it for $275,000. So you just lost $200,000. So about flipping it from a reactive to being proactive. You've seen the signs, a new coffee shop here, a luxury condo there. You think you're watching your neighborhood change in real time, but I'm here to tell you, by the time you see the construction, the deal was already done 2 years ago in a data center that you didn't even know existed. We call it digital gentrification. And it's not about the moving trucks. It's about predictive models and algorithms. Companies like Open Door are betting you don't even know the value of your own soil. They're looking at transit patterns, fiber optic installs, and zoning laws to offer you a price that looks fair today, while they're already counting the equity they're going to strip from you tomorrow. I've sat in those tax protest meetings and I've looked at the buzzwords like lifestyle density and underutilized land. And let me tell you, when they offer you $75,000 for a home that their data says will be worth $275,000 in 18 months, that is a $200,000 tax on your lack of information. That is generational wealth walking out the door before you even hand over the keys. Today, John and I are breaking down how to stop being reactive and start being strategic. We're moving from Big Mama's front porch to the local planning commission. It's time to stop asking what they're building and start asking what data are they using to build it. Let's get into it.
So when we think about political aspect of digital gentrification, we have to start with real estate. Are you familiar with the company Open Door?
I am, yes.
So when we talk about Open Door and what it is that they've been able to do, Open Door, their entire structure is based on going in and actually identifying how fast the homes are selling, whether or not there's transit access and commuter patterns that are affecting the neighborhoods, what the job growth looks like nearby, and then whether or not the neighborhoods are either what we call underpriced or cheap on paper. And so what they're doing is they are betting on you as a consumer or you as the seller being not aware of those things that would allow them to come in, offer you a price that you believe is fair, but because you're not aware of the zoning that's coming down or the laws that are being passed or the infrastructures that are going to be in place in a couple of years, you're undervaluing what the fair market would be for your home. To give you some real numbers, let's say that they come in and they offer you $300,000. You're looking at it and you're going, well, that's a pretty good price. But what they're doing is they're looking at what that house is going to be in 18 months. In 18 months, that same house may be worth $350,000. So had you not sold the Open Door, you would have had $1,000 additional dollars in terms of equity. Again, just using basic math and we're keeping things very simple here. What say you about companies like Open Door that come in because they're not doing anything illegal? They're using data. They have access to what's happening in your local government. You and I talked about this last week about being involved with local government and understanding what's coming down the pike. And they're using all of that to then come in, buy houses. They don't just buy one house, they buy clusters of houses. And so when they're buying those clusters of houses, because they have cheap money, they're able to get those houses in a relatively inexpensive manner and then be able to take advantage of that arbitrage when it happens. What say you?
Couple of things. And so personally, I use it because you know how I am. I will dispute my property taxes every single year. I always do it because you know what I say? You shouldn't have that option if you don't want me to do it. So I go in and I will go around the neighborhood, take pictures of similar homes. I look at the tax, the Travis County property tax, and then I do a comparison. I put all of that data in so that I can get my taxes lowered. Another thing that's important about that, when you're looking for a home or you're selling your home, they'll use words like mixed use potential or underutilized land or lifestyle density, stuff like that. Like those are key words where they're saying they've already done that valuation and they're looking to sell those homes at a higher price. So your property taxes can go up, a lot of different things. So looking for those key words are important to me as I'm doing my property tax protest, but also this is the second home that I've purchased. When we were coming in and looking to build, we use those words to make a determination of where we want to build, because what's that going to look like, and also making sure that the equity that we do have in the house is going to offset those property taxes because we don't have a state tax in Texas. Our property taxes are out of control. And so we have to look at those things so we can make long-term decisions.
But you're doing something, and that's great that you're doing that. So kudos to you for using local government and using the research, because you are a research person. You love to, you're a Black Karen, so you love to.
No, I'm the Black Nancy Drew. I like to get in there.
So think about this. If you are Meemaw and Peepaw, and you've been in this house for 30, 40 years, and you've watched the neighborhood go through changes, watch investments not be made with respect to the neighborhood. You watch where you had to travel outside of that neighborhood to go to find fresh groceries. You watch where they haven't put in local transit that will allow that particular neighborhood to be a bedroom community where individuals would want to then go there. The school infrastructure is not in place. So all of those things that you've been fighting for, you haven't been able to take advantage of it, or it hasn't happened yet for your family to be able to take advantage of until someone from Open Door comes and knocks on your door. And they say, Lynn, I love your neighborhood. We're new, yada, yada, yada. We're just looking for a starter home or a home that needs a little bit of loving. You've done a great job in terms of maintaining your home. Any homeowner gets these texts where individuals are sending them saying, hey, John, or hey, Lynn, are you interested in selling your house? Hell no, I'm not interested in selling my house. And if I was interested in selling my house, you couldn't afford it. That said, how do you take what you've done with respect to being informed, and then on the flip side, you have Meemaw and Peepaw who aren't as versed in going and understanding that? How do you balance those out?
I don't know how I would balance it out, but what I would encourage people to do, because I know a lot of times Meemaw and Peepaw, whoever these people are, will go to zoning and planning.
That was very right. So let's use Nana and Big Mama. So.
Oh, Big Mama, I love her. She's the one that used to get me up because she saw the devil in me.
She was right.
My Big Mama and Big Daddy. Yes. Okay. So right, let's use Big Daddy and Big Mama.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about Big Daddy, but yes, that was
my grandfather's name. They called him Big Daddy, Granddaddy, Grandpa, and Big Daddy.
That sounds like something your grandma would call him, Big Daddy.
Everybody called him Big Daddy because he was a big man, and get on with this story. At any rate, I think that's a lot of times we are more, what we think are being proactive, we're being reactive. So we'll go to the zoning and planning meetings and we'll ask questions like, what are you building? Well, they've already done the valuation. They've already used those data sets. And so we need to start being more strategic in the questions that we're asking in those meetings so that we can make strategic, financially sound decisions for ourselves. So instead of saying, what are you building? What are the data sets that you use? What are the predictive models that you use? What valuation platforms were flagged in this area? Ask like really strategic questions. It's going to do a few things. It's first going to disrupt their narrative because they were like, oh, I didn't know you knew such things. Well, we do know such things. So answer the question, because that's going to allow you as the homeowner to make more informed decisions. So when people like Open Door come in and they're like, I'll give you $75,000 for this home. Well, then in 2 years, because of the data models that you've used, you're going to turn around and flip it for $275,000. So you just lost $200,000. So it's more about flipping it from a reactive to being proactive. And then when those data sets are already done, asking very specific questions before you say, yeah, here's the title to my home and have a nice day. And then 2 years later, you're like, dang it.
Yeah. The preemptive ownership aspect is what you're referring to, where they will come in and those decisions have already been made. They've been made in terms of, we know we're going to have a Target here. We know we're going to have a Whole Foods here. We know we're going to have my Dunkin' Donuts here. And you're not aware of that because you're too busy working the 9 to 5 and putting food on the table and affording the house, that you're not able to go in and be involved with those conversations that are happening at the local and state level.
John, just let me say this. You may not have the bandwidth to go in and go to those planning meetings, but what you can do is on your way home, you can see if AT&T is putting in fiber. If they're doing, those are signs that something else is happening. They're not going to just start putting in fiber things in an area that they don't think there's growth in.
Right. You're
No
talking about
one's kind like that. They don't
right.
care about it. They care about money. And so
So
when you
pretty
start seeing those things happening, that's your indicator that something else is already on the horizon.
right. So when you have the 5G stuff and you have the data centers that are going up, you do know that there's investments that have been made by someone. With when you see those coming soon, multifamily home units that
Right.
are live, work, and play.
Right.
By the time those things come up, the money has already been made.
Exactly.
Those individuals are already casting a check.
But that doesn't mean that you are still at a disadvantage. It's still going to those meetings and asking for transparency. Not what are you building, because we can see what you're building with your little sign, but what data sets did you use? What predictive models did you use? And so that you can have access to that same information and then make an informed decision.
One of the things that when I was at the Mecca, we looked around and this is, 30 some odd years ago. And Howard was not, it was in a working class black neighborhood. Howard's always been in a working class black neighborhood. Is the operative term here. And around Howard University, there were these row houses that were in existence and a lot of them needed a lot of love. And so at that time, I think you could get into one for about $100,000, which in 1994, 95 was a lot of money. But it's a conversation that we would have amongst ourselves as alumni saying, okay, we need to buy this house because then you can rent this out to the students and you're buying equity within the community. And the other thing that we talked about specifically is buying up that real estate around Howard so that we own it. And so we can determine or have some determination in terms of what the neighborhood looks like. I say all that to say 3 years ago when I went back to DC, there was a Whole Foods. I don't know if there was a Target. It was like I was in Georgetown. The entire infrastructure of what Howard looked like around the surrounding neighborhood had changed. None of it, or very little of it, let me say that. Very little of it was owned by the university, but it serviced university students. It was owned by others who did not have melanin that came in, bought condos, bought property on the cheap, and were able to develop those things. And now, obviously, you see something like that happening in DC. Those who are familiar with DC, the whole U Street corridor, where it used to be a cultural hub. If you were Ethiopian or Eritrean or from the Middle East, it was culture. It was just that rich culture that led U Street to be what it is. Those are not familiar with this, where Ben's Chili Bowl is and all that stuff. But that stuff changed so much. And so when you think about gentrification in terms of physically happened, it digitally happens first because you have to get the data. What say you about something?
So I will say this. When I bought my first house, it was like 20s and I bought the house on my own. I didn't have this information and I was just like, what can I qualify for? So I qualified when I was like, oh my God, I'm going to buy a mansion. And then I realized I lived in Austin and no, you're not. But what I should have done, I wish I'd known at the time, is I qualified for a home in one of the coveted neighborhoods like Terrytown, Dale. These are downtown neighborhoods that are a little older. So it was at the top of my budget. What I didn't do is go in and look at those words, look for those signs, because now those homes they're multi-million-dollar homes. And I wish that I had been brave enough to do that. And then the second thing, as we talk about gentrification, there's an area called the Miller Airport, old airport. And after I bought my first house, I was like, okay, we've got to move because I went 2 boys. And now there are 3 boys in this house and I can't take it. I need my own space. And so we looked at this area and it was a little dicey. And I was thinking, I don't want to move to a neighborhood where my kids' shoes are the nicest shoes in the block. Like, I just don't want to do this. But had I been thinking and I had been more savvy, I would have looked to see multi-use facilities. I would have looked for, are they putting in 5G? Because now those homes are sought after and it's in a great neighborhood, and I wish that I had purchased it. So I think that one of the things that I hope that anyone listening that is maybe in a situation where they're either looking to first-time buyers or they're selling their home is to consider the things that people aren't saying. Because I wish I had made better decisions when I was buying my first house, and then when we were looking for the second house, been a little bit not worried about whose shoes were nicer, but looking at what's this going to look like 5-10 years, because we bought in a neighborhood that it was a nice neighborhood, and I thought that the schools were going to be fantastic for the boys. We ended up taking them to private school anyway, So we were still driving 50, 60 miles a day to get them to private school. So just bad decisions is what I'm saying. Don't be like me.
Yeah, but you're, bad and bougie.
Bad and bougie. So Howard, again, man, I might go get my doctorate over there.
Actually, bad and bougie is out of Atlanta. It's from the Migos. That's the
I
name.
don't know who these people are. It sounds like Amiga. Is that a taco? I don't know what Amiga. What are you talking about?
Amigos, the Migos. So the one thing that I do want to zero in on is when you think about the political aspect and three cities that jump out to me, because three different examples. We talked about DC and around Howard. And the wonderful thing about Howard and why the investment was made around Howard is Howard University wasn't going anywhere. The physical infrastructure of Howard University was there. And with that, you had culture. You also had the availability of cheap housing. So a company could come in and buy all of that information. They could buy all of that in terms of buildings and real estate. They knew that the kiddos were going to be there in terms of school. So all those things were there. Now flip that to Brooklyn in New York. And we all know that with New York, whether it was Biggie, whether it was Jay-Z, Brooklyn had this larger than life, well, even Bill Cosby. The Cosby Show was set in Brooklyn, right? And anyone that you talk to from New York right now that used to be from Brooklyn, they always talk about how it is that they can't, if they wanted to afford a place in Bed-Stuy or Fort Greene or one of those neighborhoods in Brooklyn, they could not because they've been priced down.
Well, Black Lives Matter, so.
Right. What say you about something like that, where you have these historical Black communities that are you have individuals being priced out by them that are changing over?
Well, so again, it just goes back to being informed and keeping yourself informed before we give up our property. You know how I feel about selling our land and our property, especially to sell it to someone that doesn't look like us. That generational wealth comes from property, and we need to make better, smarter decisions. And I completely understand. I do understand that sometimes, someone passes away and then the family can't keep up with the taxes or whatever. If there is a way, I always encourage people to try and hang on to that property, because you just never know.
So think about this though. But these guys, we'd be remiss if we did not talk about the shit that's going on with respect to, you just mentioned that you're going to a Super Bowl party and you'll have right now these rednecks, racists, or whomever, however you want to identify them, that are throwing a different Super Bowl halftime show because they don't like Bad Bunny and what he represents in terms of culture. And I say all that to say they want to invest in the neighborhoods because of the culture. If the culture didn't exist, then you wouldn't want to invest in a Washington, D.C. that used to be Chocolate City, or a Brooklyn that has some of the strongest cultural identities. You love our rhythm, but you don't want to deal with the blues. And so
that's interesting, John, because I can even say that here in Austin, and we don't have a large Black population, but we have enough. And so the east side of Austin, 6th Street, it used to be diverse and a little scary. You go over there now, and I remember driving in the neighborhood, I don't know, a few years ago. And I was like, how do you have a multi-million-dollar condo right across the street from, I don't know, the projects? Like, what? And then, so that entire neighborhood has changed. And I always thought Austin used to be the coolest, just laid back place. It was so cool. You could show up any way you wanted to here. Downtown Austin has significantly changed. And my love for the city has also changed, because it used to be super cool, super quirky, like just basically just anything you want, show up the way you want to. And a lot of the people, developers, Facebook, Tesla, a lot of people moved into the area and changed the culture, which I thought was interesting. You came here for the culture, and then you changed the culture. I just find that fascinating.
No, they like aspects of the culture. They don't like you.
Okay, well, it's not even me. It's not even me, because 6th Street is very mixed, and it's not people that look like me all the time. And so even like the music's too loud. Well, it's 6th Street, and so it's going to be, why did you move here? Why do we need to change because you moved into an area that you already knew how it was?
Because I'm going to uplift your property value.
I don't want you to uplift my property value, because you're going to uplift me out of this neighborhood.
That's the whole point. Because I'm just letting you know you don't know what you have. You
Right.
need me to come in and tell you how much you're worth. And
Yes.
so that leads to the third example in terms of politics, and that's the city that I've fallen in love with, and that's Atlanta. Atlanta has done something different than what we saw happen in DC, what we saw happen in Brooklyn. Atlanta, because of the infrastructure and the politics of the Black culture in Atlanta, we sort of saw some of that coming down the pike with the Atlanta Beltline, right? And so what the Beltline did was when the residents of Atlanta saw the Beltline start being developed, they saw it was impacting Black neighborhoods, right? And so one of the things that they said was, okay, we've seen this before. We dealt with the interstate highway and how it went smack dab through prominent Atlanta neighborhoods. And so here's what's not going to happen. We're going to work with you, businesses. We'll let you build the Beltline, but we're going to have prominent seats at the table. And it's going to be a partnership. It's not going to be us selling out to you. It's going to be us maintaining our residences to be able to take advantage of this green space. And so that model is now being utilized in a city I know you love, Memphis.
I knew you were going to say something ridiculous. I've never even been to Memphis. I was like, what is this going to be? Like Spokane, Washington? What are you going to say?
Another one, Oakland, California.
Okay, well, I love Oakland, so.
Raleigh.
But I think that that's important. We do need to ask for a seat at the table. We need to ask for protections. Even if those predictive models have already been used, ask for protections. How are we going to ensure that our residents aren't displaced? How are we going to grandfather in tax codes or tax whatever it is? We can use our voice to ask for things before we say, okay, here, you can have it.
Right. And so what you're saying is that, again, we're going back to politics. Politics is not just about elections. It's about who gets access to early information. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago with respect to getting in early on the investments of Ring and things like that. If you're getting in early on stocks, if you're getting in early on what a city is becoming, then you're able to be there at the ground floor to be able to make money on it. If you're late to the table and you're finding out about it after all the decisions have been made, then that's where we are at a deficit. The individuals that are making the decisions typically don't look like us. And so we have to make certain that we are individuals that are in that room who are making those decisions.
I'm sorry, John. I just want to say, because sometimes it sounds like it's daunting and it sounds like it's going to consume a lot of bandwidth, time, resources, and like, well, where do I start? And for me, it's really just being aware, like like I said, when you're coming home from work and you're seeing that 5G is being put in the neighborhood, or you're seeing these signs that says multicultural, whatever use, those are signs that, okay, I need to pay more attention, dig a little deeper, maybe do a Zoom when they're doing planning commissions, ask for a Zoom to just dial in and listen to it. And what are they saying? And listening for those buzzwords, because those are going to help you, again, make informed decisions. And that's what we want people to do, is to make informed decisions so that we're keeping that capital and we're keeping the finances within our community, but also building that generational wealth. And that's just that's my passion, is that generational wealth.
Yeah, I take your point. So what's the point? The point is that the maps of our neighborhoods are being redrawn in the binary code long before the first shovel hits the dirt. We spent decades fighting physical gentrification, the rising rents, the luxury condos, and Whole Foods moving in, but we're missing the silent war. Digital gentrification is the process of using our data, our movement, and our lack of access to early information to strip the equity out of our community before we even know it's valuable. As Lynn and I discussed, they love our rhythm, but they don't like our blues. They want the culture of Chocolate City, but they want it optimized through a predictive model that doesn't include the people who created that culture in the first place. Now, when a company like Open Doors uses cheap money to buy clusters of homes, they aren't just buying real estate. They're buying the future wealth of our children and selling it back to the highest bidder. See, if we stay reactive, waiting until the coming soon sign goes up, we've already lost the arbitrage. We have to move from being researchers to being strategists. It's not enough to be Black Nancy Drew. We have to be the ones in the room when the data sets are being chosen. If you see fiber being laid, that's a signal. If you hear lifestyle density in zoning meetings, that's a siren. Knowledge is the only thing that offsets the data advantage. We have to protect our soil because property is the last true engine of generational wealth we have left. If you took anything from today, do two things for me. First, I want you to look up your local planning commission's next Zoom meeting. Don't just watch. Ask them what predictive models they are using for your zip code. Let's disrupt the narrative. Second, if you haven't yet subscribed to I Take Your Point, we'd love to have you join us. While you're out and about this week, make the time to do something nice for yourself. And while you're at it, take the time to do something nice for someone else. Until next time, we'll talk to you.
And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and spending your time with us on I Take Your Point. For more unfiltered conversations like this, click the link in the description. Huge thank you to our production team. We couldn't do this without you. Quick disclaimer, the views shared are those of the host and guest and are for informational purposes only, not professional advice. Keep building your own table, take care, and be well.